flash, and it's 7:01. Ellie, do we have any public comments?
As of right now, no. I think we'll have it open for the first 15 minutes or so of the meeting, but as of right now, we have no open comments.
Okay. Okay, in that case, we can 7:12. Okay, great. Let's see. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from last meeting?
Can you see us all, Tom?
I see you all.
I'm a yes on that.
Yes.
I'm almost done.
Not. I just put the link in the chat if you did not have access to it. And somebody would like to make a motion to accept, accept the minutes.
I have a quick question on the minutes. Are we allowed to make comments on the minutes when they are sent by email, or we have to discuss it in this forum?
So the minutes from a previous meeting are in a sense codified. If there's a mistake, we correct it. Now, if there's something that you want to bring to this meeting in regard to something that happened in the last meeting, then we could, then we would handle it under new business or something. But we don't. The minutes are just a record, and we just verify it's accurate or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess I'm sorry, I'm getting an entrance. I'm not sure why.
I just have a question. There's one sentence in there. Yeah, there's just one sentence in there that I don't know what it means. I'm gonna paste it in the chat, but it was part of my supposed comments. So I just want to make sure it was accurate. I don't know what that means. There exists comparative valuation of in-person versus virtual learning. The rest of that sentence I totally agree with. Like I did say that a teacher moving around in a classroom in the way that we do in 2021 would be very difficult to capture with the technology that we have. I just don't understand for clause.
I thought it captured what you said actually when I read it.
Okay, as long as you guys, what does that first part mean? Just so I know. I was the one who said it.
I think I was trying to capture the idea that there is a difference in terms of quality between what students experience in person versus virtual, possibly.
Perfect. That works for me. Thank you.
I actually really appreciated the word choice, Ellie.
Thank you. I did not know what comparative valuation meant. I mean, that was just me. So thank you. I appreciate it. I was the one who supposedly said this, so I just want to make sure I understood what it meant.
I moved to approve the minutes from last month.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? I'm sorry, Robbie, did you object or did you were voting yes?
Yeah, I just voted yes.
Okay.
I was not on camera.
Okay. Any abstentions for those who were not at the last meeting? Nope. In that case, we have passed the approval of the minutes. Okay. So I know that Bart, there's not much to update, but I felt it was important to put it here just as a stream of consciousness for us all, that if it's changing or getting better or staying the same. on the School Loop website. I did notice a couple weeks ago, I was trying to look at something at the Hayward, and they were down the whole weekend apparently, and they were also on School Loop. So I didn't know what the status for us is.
All right, so I think on this item, there's nothing new to add. I don't think we've had more or less outages, and the service has maintained a similar. I kind of tried to watch my previous update on it, so I would just say we're the same as last month.
I guess the question would be, do we think that's an acceptable level? And you know better than us, in sense this is your job. For you, is this an acceptable level of service?
I will look into answering that question. I think that's very helpful, actually, to bring that up. So,
Okay.
Discussing we have a new public information officer who has started, so we've been discussing it internally, but it would be good for us to be able to answer that.
Any other questions on? Oh, Dawn?
I'm getting some background noise. I'm trying to look and see if everyone's on mute, other than obviously Bart and Tom who are talking, but is anyone else hearing it? No? Okay, it might just be me.
No, I'm hearing it too, Don.
I didn't pick it up specifically, but I had my mic on as well.
Tom left the meeting? Oh, Tom's back.
Where'd Tom go? Tom, come back.
I think, Tom, you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying something on my computer. I don't like using this computer, but I'm using it. So I'm not sure if it's me or not, but I wanted to try there. Okay, I guess nothing else on the school. Next on the agenda is the how do we decide agenda items. I think we had a good conversation last time, and my impression was that people seem to be comfortable with the way that we currently do it as a whole. But I think the big question is, do we want to in some way formalize it so that nobody's left out? That, I think, is the question. So if whether it's a community member or a staff member or anybody how do we need to codify it? There's no doubt in my mind that technology increasingly is going to become an overwhelming priority in education for Fremont Unified. So what do we look like that? Allison?
Yeah, I just wanted to, and it was very clearly reflected in the minutes that I objected and said that it should be a formalized process to be fair. I was frustrated in the past under our former CTO a long time ago that I deliberately multiple times brought up stuff and was never ever put on the agenda. And I know I had many colleagues who felt the same way. And I think you guys and Lucas are doing a great job making sure that everything that's brought to you gets put on the agenda. But this is what I tell my kids when I advise a club, that like there needs to be a procedure that's transparent and clear so that when you graduate and another kid takes over, that it's very easy to know that this is how you put things on the agenda, for example. And so that's what I would advocate for, is that we have some sort of like, the agenda gets sent out at this date. And then if you want to suggest something, you have to do it by this date. And then whatever, right? But there's something so that it's not just like, I think we're all pretty much doing a good job in good faith, because that depends very much on the individuals who are in charge at the time.
Anurag?
Yeah, it's Arun. Yeah, so I'd like to know, what is the procedure right now? Is it that you send what you want discussed to yourself and Lucas? And in which case I do have some things to send, but I haven't sent anything right now. And obviously, if there are too many, we need a way to rank them based on the preferences of all the people here. So it seems to me that there has to be some guideline. Now, I haven't been here in the past, so it's possible that we've never had enough issues to discuss and that thing has never come up. In which case, if there are just 2 or 3 issues, we just park them. But if there are issues that are competing for our attention, I think we need some kind of guideline on how we just rank them in some order. So that's my comment on that. And then how do we bring it forward? Is it just email, or do we get a chance to look at it before at least those 2 issues? That's it.
Yeah, so just kind of a recap real quick. In the past, and this is the first year I've been president. I'm trying to think how many years. The only Robert would know better than I how many years I've been on it, because Robert's the only one been here longer than me. But in the past, this is anecdotal, but I cannot remember where anybody but the CTO ever brought things to the table prior to, say, 4 to 5 years ago. And then we started to see a percolation, which I think is a good thing, of whether it was teachers, whether it was teachers or some community members were started taking an interest in TAC. And to give credit where credit is due, much of this came from the board pushing out back to the TAC and saying, well, has TAC looked at this? Or has TAC evaluated? Does TAC have a recommendation? So that was where it was. It's never been a real problem. And for me, I was always a member. I felt some frustration, and this is where I think the prioritization comes into it, when something just jumps ahead, quote, of the line, because any one of us say this is the most important thing, and the rest of us, because we're, quote, nice people, which is often in a committee situation, tend to just go along with it. So that's a kind of anecdotal how it's been run in the past. Linda, your hand is up.
Yeah, I mean, we are an advisory committee, so we should be taking direction, I believe, from district. I understand. I mean, I know in other committees and boards that I've sat on, I would like to get the agenda out like a week before the meeting and ask the members, are there things missing on this agenda? But I think us being an advisory committee, we need to be taking direct, I mean, we can make suggestions that would maybe go on the suggested agenda items, but I think being an advisory committee, we should be taking direction from Lucas as to what are the district's most important issues. And those should be coming from Allison from teachers. They should be going through you to say, these are the things that are brought up, and going through Lucas to determine whether these are items that we need to provide guidance on. I mean, they just can't come from us and then just thrown on the agenda, because those are our issues, not necessarily the district's issues, or not necessarily the school board's issues. So I don't think it's kind of a willy-nilly, these are the things that get put on the agenda because we want them on the agenda. We need to be taking direction, I believe, from district, from Lucas, from the board. So that's all I have.
Manjeet?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I would say would be echoing what Linda said. The priorities is what we are talking about, not necessarily agenda. And the visibility of that is with Lucas, because if the teachers from the schools are asking for something, Lucas will have a visibility into that. And he's the funnel who could decide what's more, create a priority based on that, what's to be addressed right away. And that can come in an agenda. Now, if we have something from prior discussions and we want to bring it up, we can of course ping Lucas and say this is something we still need to talk about. But again, it's more of prioritizing items on the list for discussion. So that funnel is where Lucas comes into the He's the center of what we are. And like Linda correctly said, we are advisory committee to the board. So the advisory is based on the priorities as set by the board, not by us.
Okay, I'm going to put myself in here. I guess I could have raised my hand. I didn't. I'm trying to phrase this so it comes out right. We are a technology advisory committee. And if it was true that the direction that Lucas got was when the board sat down as a group and said to Lucas, Lucas, this is the most important thing that TAC needs to do, then we would get it. I think in some ways we're putting Lucas in an awkward position, because if Lucas is the funnel, then he, in a sense, he's having to prioritize. And each of us represents, well, not all of us, but most of us represent some particularly constituency. And as Allison brought up, we've had CTOs that were not as open as Lucas to input. So I think that's the key to having a process, is that if I always read her name, Margaret, if Anne, has something, it has something that is important to her particular constituency, she should have a process, a vehicle to bring it onto the agenda that doesn't involve having Lucas to say, and I just saw Vivek joined us, but Lucas sitting in his office saying, so I have to put something on the agenda. Who should I put more important, Vivek or Anne or CJ? And, Lucas reports to CJ, he reports then to Vivek. Unfortunately, so we would hope that but it's unfair to Lucas. So I guess my position is we should have a process, whether it's Anne or Anita or Linda or Allison or Robert, they represent their constituency. It's a concern. They can enter the process. Now, if something comes direct from the board to Lucas, then we could reprioritize. If it's some, I guess a good example was when we found out Illuminate was going out at whatever level of our participation. But I think that agenda items that come in from various groups should have equal opportunity to be heard and spoken in our group. Robert?
So a couple of things. One, just a quick reminder, at the end of every meeting, at least lately, we have an agenda item that says, hey, let's talk about future agenda item, future meetings. So if you forget, we set aside time at every meeting to talk about this. And you don't have to send out an email. We often do come up with topics, deciding what we're going to talk about the next meeting. So I think there is time to propose items. I don't think we've had too many occasions where we've had so many things to do that things get dropped off or we never get to something. I'm guessing, and I don't exactly remember the issues, but in the past, things have been denied, which is different from saying we don't have time to talk about it. One thing is to bring it up in the meeting now, at the end of the meeting, say, I would like to talk about this, and if there's interest, we'll talk about it. Ultimately, the board does drive it. So I guess if the CTO is not cooperative, and the chair is really the leader of this group. The chair should be also deciding what's on the agenda. But if the chair and the CTO are not cooperating, then go to a board member and say, hey, we need to talk about this.
So just a quick question. This wasn't on my calendar till late in the afternoon. It took me some time to get back and join in. So what's the issue that we are trying to discuss here?
We're talking about how things are placed on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Allison, we just got a note. We are at the 20 minutes on this item. So we're not officially Robert's Rule of Orders, but I'd like to say that we limit our conversation to another 5 minutes, And then if nobody else has a motion, I would like to make a motion on this at the end of 5 minutes here. So
I'll just make it super quick. We used to have different tech committees around the district in terms of like a parent tech committee and a staff tech committee. None of those exist anymore. This is the only forum for anybody to express themselves about technology in the district. So I do think it's important for us to do as Tom is saying and have some venue for people to ask for things to be on the agenda. Even if there's a rule that anything the board asks for directly trumps anything that we ask for, it still would allow us to have a venue. I was listening to what Robert was saying and I was super surprised. The future agenda items, to me, that was always like things that had already been decided upon. I didn't know I was allowed to suggest new things in that section. So as long as we know that that's the case, then sure, I would love to bring them up. My understanding has always been that the open comments is the only time that I can bring up anything new. And so I think it would just be nice if we had a clear procedure for things getting agendized, because this is the only existing technology committee in the entire district. Thanks.
Bart?
Just some meeting housekeeping. The public comment form has now been closed. It was open for 15 minutes, as we suggested, and we got no comments.
Thank you. Oops, Ellie, was that yours, or do you have a comment on agenda?
About agendizing items, I'm thinking, you know, I'm here as the FSMA representative, but is my essential function to advise or participate as a voice on this committee from that perspective on existing agenda items? Or is it that I'm supposed to act as the conduit to voice anything, voice dirty laundry, to needs, to great ideas from the particular viewpoint that I have from management? And I think that really informs what the answer is to how items are agendized. If it is just needing to also provide a venue for different constituent groups to bring up topics, perhaps having some sort of agenda item where different groups are able to simply just report out, so there's an option for at least publicizing what is of importance to that particular group that they're representing. Otherwise, I am comfortable sticking to simply providing advice from the perspective that I bring.
Well, I could speak for myself in my situation. I have always brought to the committee, to TAC, what I felt were the pressing issues for teachers, but also the problems or issues that the students in the technology-wise were experiencing. We now have a student representative, so hopefully that student will be able to represent that constituency a little bit better. But I think that's kind of what I always felt was to bring those issues that perhaps the TAC was not aware of, that teachers were experiencing, particularly in the classroom. So that's always been my feeling. I guess, Ellie, that would be, for lack of a better word, vices that, not dirty laundry is per se, but you know, it's an awkward position for you. You're not going to come out and say, you know, the district's just not doing their job, right? However, I think there are technology issues that we may not be aware of as TAC, or even, you know, that you feel TAC might be better suited to, you know, to be looking at. So I think that would be. There's 2 people in the queue, I guess. Well, now there's 3 people. Is the committee comfortable continuing on this subject? Because we're well beyond our 20 minutes now.
Can I propose someone make a motion and we just decide?
I would like to make a motion then. I should say that I did say that. I would like to make a motion that at a minimum, 1 from each group meet a subcommittee to develop a protocol for getting items on the agenda. And that would be 1, 2, well, up to 5 members. And they would report not at the next meeting, but the meeting after, to give them plenty of time. Just so everybody's aware, it's always been very problematic to have a subcommittee meet, but if it's important to people, they will get there. That's my motion.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? We always do it backwards. Everybody does.
I have a question on your, no, you did it right, Tom. You have a motion and a second and then discussion.
Right.
I guess my question is, how do we, would that be voluntary subcommittee? And do we have enough people who would be willing to do that? Would be my
I
only.
guess we'll find out if the motion passes. I know that there's at least 2 people that would volunteer to be on it. So, but I will graciously step aside if we get another to make 5. So, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. So we would have 5 people. Preferably, we would have from different groups volunteering. What I'd like to do is let people think for while we continue on, and before we adjourn, I will ask for volunteers. And then what we'll do is based on, we'll fill each group first, and then if we don't have enough for the 5, then we can go back around and people can volunteer if everybody's okay with that. Next up is Lucas. You said you had the kind of an overview of the live video classroom streaming requirements.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Tom. For this piece, I'm not anticipating it will be very lengthy, but I did want to present to the group 3 scenarios. So obviously there's a little history here. We've been talking about this topic, and without, you know, having specifics, really the best we can do is to go into some scenarios that might make sense from the actual technology perspective. So I've got just a single PowerPoint slide that I'm going to pop up on the screen that gives 3 scenarios for what might work in a classroom, keeping in mind that each classroom would have to be evaluated, or each space would have to be evaluated for streaming, you know, within the district. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll have an opportunity, I think, just to talk about it a little bit. This gives you an idea of the thinking. I've worked with Luis Zamora, who's our multimedia administrator, and run this by him. We do have some standard implementations that we've been doing at our middle schools, junior highs, and high schools. But this will probably vary a bit, simply because these spaces are going to be a little bit more unique purpose. I'm going to go ahead and let's choose my entire screen here. And I'll pull this up. All right. And I think everybody should be able to see my screen. Yep, I can see it streaming right now. This is really a simplified version of scenarios. And a regular size classroom is scenario 1. Our most common implementation is, I believe it's a 109-inch pull-down screen. We've been standardizing on standard laser projectors so that we don't have to replace bulbs for those, and that's a significant savings both in terms of the lamp replacement itself and then also labor. So that's what the standard laser projector is. Actually, let me put this in full presentation mode. Sorry about that. That should be a little bit better. And I'm making some assumptions here that that a classroom or a space that this goes into has nothing in it. So we might find cases where we wouldn't have to purchase all of this equipment. So there would obviously have to be a mounting bracket. And then in the case of the regular classroom and the small size classroom, I would recommend a pan tilt zoom camera. Those do tend to be pretty expensive, but they're pretty nice, allowing the camera to follow who might be talking in the classroom, whether it be the teacher, or whether it be a student. And then a very common implementation as well includes speakers installed on the ceiling, and then with some type of amplification, and then a mic. Typically the instructor would have a lapel mic, and then there might also be mics hanging from the ceiling in the classroom for when students are speaking, or if, depending on the number of students, it might just be a centralized mic that would pick up the voices from all students. And you can see scenario 2, again, small size classroom. This would just be really anything between a conference room size space and a regular size classroom. I put in here the possibility of a 75-inch TV screen, but certainly the alternative could be a pull-down screen with a projector as well. This was really just intended to give an example, but you can see the majority of the rest of this is very similar, because even in a small classroom where you might only be able to fit, say, 20 students in there, you're still going to need good clear audio and some mics. And then the final scenario would be a conference room, which I would say typically would hold like 8 to 10 at the most. And you can see in those spaces, it's really common to have a TV, which is why I put that there. And then you wouldn't necessarily have to have a pan tilt zoom webcam, which would save funds in that area. And then you would need some type of speakers. And that's really it. I think really at this point, we really can't move too much further without getting direction from the instructional side and which spaces we would work with, because we would really need to engineer each of those spaces. And that's it.
So Lucas, real quick, on the scenario 2 and scenario 3, do we also, are these smart TVs, or are these Google TVs that we can Google Cast to, or do we need to buy something? Is there another piece of the puzzle there for being able to broadcast to the screens?
Yeah, so typically when we put in TVs, whether it be a TV or a projector, there would be cabling that would be installed as part of that. That isn't specifically laid out here, but it is inferred just because it's standard practice. The other piece that I would recommend in the case of these smaller spaces, specifically conference rooms, is we could put in some wireless casting capabilities. But the only downside of that is sometimes if you're streaming high definition video, it doesn't always work so great, but that really has improved quite a bit. But we always have cabling in place. Our standard is at a minimum 1 HDMI with 1 VGA with an auxiliary cable with a port on the wall. But testing out some wireless options would be, I think, a pretty good idea in this case too, especially with the conference rooms. Microsoft actually has some pretty good options that are out there, and I believe that uses the Miracast protocol, which I know all Windows machines support that. I don't actually remember if Macs do, but there's plenty of options for wireless as well.
Anuradha?
Yes, so just quickly, are you assuming two-way communication in these classrooms, or one-way, instructor to student and audience? And so I guess that influences what the TV is going to be like, if you're going to actually have people in there or just content in there. And I guess I'll just let you answer that question. And then the other question I had, sorry, I'll just say it. Is there a cost estimate for each of these? A rough cost estimate?
So good question. So the intention with this is that there would be back and forth. Oh yeah. The intention is that there would also be a back and forth. So if a student on one end was talking, student on the other end could hear, and then they could also respond, which is part of the purpose of the mics in the room is to support that. So each space on both ends would need to have these sets of tools. And of course, I was reminded by one of my counterparts that we would need to have a computer, of course, for this to work as well, which I was just assuming that, but I probably shouldn't have. And it might even be a machine that is set up permanently, although, certainly we could have a laptop set up and brought in. And then I do have a cost estimate for it. I didn't include that as part of this. For the regular size classroom, when we put all the costs together, if you truly had to do everything, including the cabling, not including the computer, It would probably be $5,300 to $5,900, give or take. Scenario 2 would be $4,600 to $5,000. And then scenario 3 would be the least expensive, assuming we went with like simple tabletop speakers or something like that. That would probably cost about $1,800.
Anne?
Thank you. I realize these are sort of dream scenarios. And this is the dream scenario of the physical equipment needed, including that computer. But we also need to consider the people power that is needed to order, install, train, etc. So if we have a kind of a general cost idea, we also need to consider the cost of people, which would be likely classified employees, and then the training to use the devices would likely be teachers. So want to make sure that's recognized. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Anne. I will say that the prices don't take into account maintenance and support of the equipment. That's an important piece. And you are right that classified staff would be the ones supporting it.
Juan? Juan, you're still muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized. Yeah, I just want to add on top of that what the cost of maintenance, maybe a cost of attrition, because those are electronic components. Well, say if you have TV 3 or 5 years later, it will be broken. So maybe there was some kind of estimate on how long it's going to last, and how much it's going to take to replace it. Yeah, this kind of maintenance or attrition schedule, that would be good. Another one, I have a very quick question. Since CTO, you mentioned about the ideas for being able to two-way conversation, but I recall really the purpose for students to communicate with themselves, and for students, some of them, they may want to do some whiteboard, blackboard discussion. Resolution for those whiteboard or blackboard content to be captured and passed over to the other side, and they can still be recognizable. So that's a quick question. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Look, I just want to caution everybody. You're all aware Lucas's department is stretched right now like a rubber band. What we're looking at right here is a very end of a long process. In terms of, it's never been talked to with teachers, how the rooms we're talking, do they exist? So I think before we asked Lucas and his department to spend too much time developing all this, I think there needs to be a lot more done as people, whether it's staff, either whatever. So, I mean, I want to caution us that we not spend a whole lot of TAC time on a program that may or may not ever come to fruition, since it's not been broached by any other group outside of this. So I just want us to keep that in mind. Vivek?
Yeah, so I want to echo what you just said, Tom. So the ask from this committee was to look at the possibility and what's needed if and when this thing could become a reality. But the next thing is for instruction and curriculum committee to take this and say, hey, if we want to do this, what are potential places where it could be done, and then all the stakeholders would have to be brought into it, right? So this is kind of, I wouldn't say the end of the process, but we have been going in kind of a circle as to, does technology exist? Does the process exist? Do we have buy-in from stakeholders? But this kind of puts one stake in the ground. And now we have to go through and see how other parts of FUSD have to, will they come together? How can they come together? All of that is to be defined. But from TAC perspective, I think Lucas, what he has done defines if there's intent, then what would be the technology? And I think at this point, this topic can be tabled here until there's some action item that comes from the board to go implement something.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. Appreciate that work there. I always envision now I'm having a brain freeze. TEDx presentations, right? That's the ultimate, right? You know. So okay, so new business. This was brought up last time, and this is not new. About what, how would we establish what the minimum technology standards belong in a classroom?
Sorry, Tom, before we go there, is there any resolution to be made? Vivek made a comment on that. So do we need to make a resolution on that, or we just let it stand?
I think Vivek kind of brought it. We've gone as far as we really can go without all of there's a lot of other pieces if this ever came to fruition. So I think Lucas has given a broad outline of what those classrooms would look like from a technology standpoint. But in terms of us, we really don't have any say on anything beyond that. We've not even gotten direction from the board that we should even be looking. This was just an agenda item that was brought that, you know, what does it kind of look like in a I'm not the word vague, but just in a philosophical vision. Let's see here, Vivek. Vivek, your hands up.
Oh yes, I was going to say that as part of the meeting minutes around this will get documented, and as part of the report out to the board from the committee, this would get reported, and I think that would be the extent. I know Lucas wants to say something as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only piece I was going to say is really, I see the TAC portion is done until we get very specific direction. At that point, the technology advisory could actually look at specific models and equipment that would actually fall into these categories if it made sense at that time. The reality is, once we know the scope of this, it may turn out that really all we're looking at is conference rooms and small groups of students at one school and a regular classroom in the other location. So until we know that, we really can't say, well, we're going to choose this brand and we're going to choose these specific things. So that's my perspective on it.
Thank you.
I'm going to suggest that we table the classroom minimum standards to next meeting. And then Lucas wanted to talk a little bit about the classroom management software. And then we have the reaffirmation, which should take about 15 seconds because we are running a little bit late here. We haven't got the CTO update. So if nobody objects, I'd like to table number 1 on new business and then go right to 2. Nope. Classroom management software, Lucas.
All right, thanks, Tom. I don't have a presentation tonight on this, but for those who have been on the committee before, you are well aware that there's been a strong interest in having classroom management software. And on the agenda, we listed Hapara as an example. Hapara is targeted at managing Chromebooks primarily, and our district, I haven't looked recently, but I think sometime this fall, give or take, we're going to have about 25,000 Chromebooks. I know we did hit over that number, but then we have some that are end of lifing. So with the number of devices, I do think it makes sense to have an option for managing the Chromebook devices, but historically, part of the reason, of course, that we haven't done this is because of cost. And we've had some schools that have expressed interest in purchasing Hapara on their own. And there are some challenges with that, just in terms of the licensing and how do we push that out so that we're making sure that we're getting the correct devices. We've experienced kind of the same challenge with some of our software that we've purchased, particularly when we're trying to manage it in a central manner. So one elementary school buys a piece of software, and then we try and deploy that for them. And then another elementary school buys it, and we try and deploy that. So from a management perspective, it always makes it more complex when we go with that route. From the IT department's perspective, and I think certainly even from the school's perspective, everybody would love for us to just be able to buy a district license for this. But I don't want to necessarily jump to any conclusions here, because I know our Windows machines won't work with Apara, which is an issue for our high schools, and I think some of our middle schools as well. And so I do want to reopen this conversation, predicating it with, at this time, I don't really have any funds specifically in the IT budget that I can allocate for that. However, that's one of the purposes of this committee. If we're gonna, if we really think that that's something that's important for our schools, we can promote that and, I guess request funding for it as well. But right now, my budget will not support doing this, which I will tell you that I did work towards making that happen this year, but then there were some other priorities that came up. So that's where we're at. And I want to open it up for discussion and people's thoughts on this.
Allison?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who teaches in a room full of computers all day, this is something that I feel really strongly about. My school has used a program called SmartSync for many years that has is at the end of its life. The company is not making it anymore, so we need to transition. I have 35 desktop computers and then only 10 laptops. So I would really like a solution that works for both of my machines. And so for us, we've gone through this long process this year to acquire Net Support, which is the program that ROP uses, which would encompass both of those devices. And I've had a very difficult time sort of communicating with the district and getting them to allow, everybody to allow us to do this. So for me, it's not as simple as like everyone's on a Chromebook. We really need a lab management software. And then the other thing that I wanted to communicate is that it's not just like, oh, if the kids are doing something inappropriate, I can block them on their screens. I do a lot of things with my lab management software. For example, yes, if kids are doing something, you can block their screen so that they all listen to you at a certain time, but also you can do things like sending them all a link at the same time or a document all at the same time. Or if Johnny has done a beautiful job in his paragraph, projecting that up on the screen so you can show everybody like, hey, this is a good topic sentence, this is what it looks like. There's lots of different things that you can do with the lab management software besides just like, I'm controlling your screen. And I think a lot of teachers have been sort of doing without it since we got rid of Para. And I think that's led to, I was talking with a teacher the other day who was just very frustrated because they had a lab day in another lab, not mine, because I still am maintaining SmartSync by like hook or by crook. But he was in another lab and a lot of the students were just not doing anything. They were playing the snake game. They were doing other things on their computers, and he's doing his best to walk around like a little maniac, looking physically at what they're doing on all of their screens. It's just not very effective. Whereas if you're, broadcasting my screen is another thing that I do a lot. So if I have kids sitting all over my lab in places where they're really far away from my board, especially now that my room is socially distanced by 6 feet, and my smart board is really far away from some of those kids in the back row. I get kids saying, hey, my eyesight's not that good. Like I'm sitting way back here. And I'm like, it's not a problem because I'm going to broadcast what I'm doing on your screen. I can't do that without lab management software. I can't even tell you what a difference it makes. If you ever need to be convinced of that, you can come down and visit me and I'll show you what I do. But we need something, and we haven't had something for way too long.
Ellie? Ellie, are you there? Your hand's raised?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
I wanted to start with that. I want to be a student in Allison's class because it sounds like there's some fantastic learning going on in there.
I've been there. It's true. Very exciting stuff she does.
I want to offer a counterpoint in terms of the way finances might be allocated, because while there might be many classrooms across the district where there are teacher users that want to offer that type of interaction to their students. There are also some classrooms that just need a functioning device. And as we have tons of Chromebooks that are approaching their potential end of service life, having a management software that enhances the student's experience, I don't see as much of a value in that if there aren't actually Chromebooks to support the kids being using it.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification, I'm not asking anyone to pay for this. I have a grant for it. I just can't get people to permit me to have it. I'm not asking for any money. I know that's separate from our discussion, but like if we could even just let people install this stuff and use it if they have their own money for it, that would be a big help.
Okay. I am gonna call on you, Bart. Do we have to do an official motion for the reaffirmation of remote meetings, or or just having in our minutes, is that enough?
No, we do have to have a vote, a motion and a vote.
Okay. So somebody like to make a motion that we reaffirm our remote meetings?
So moved. That was Ann.
Second, Ann's first. We have a second. Allison seconds. Any conversation? Nope. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So moved. We are reaffirming that we are having a remote meeting next time. Lucas, you're up.
All right, Tom, my CTO update is quite short this week. So if we really want to go back and revisit classroom minimum technology standards, we could.
Well, let's do the CTO. People may
Okay.
have questions, They might put you under the grill there, Lucas,
It looks like Arun has a question.
Arun, go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, that was just my raised hand from the motion. I didn't put it down, so I don't know. But that was.
Okay. All right, well, CTO update. I really only have one major update for this meeting, and that is that our emergency connectivity funding through the federal E-rate program has been approved. So this is a really big deal. It was just maybe a week and a half ago, or a little bit longer than that. And for those who don't remember or didn't hear about it, the emergency connectivity funding is currently one-time funding that is being offered to support families who don't have a device at home and who don't have internet at home. We, as districts who applied, had to do our best effort to, and that is exactly the language that they used. We had to do our best effort to determine what that number of devices might be and the number of students who might need internet at home. So this will provide over 6,000 Chromebooks, and these are devices that have to go home to the students. They cannot be kept at the schools. And we will have funding for up to 1,120 hotspots through AT&T. The district does have some costs that are not covered by the program, but fortunately the vast majority of the program, or the vast majority of the costs are covered. We won't be able to realize the entire amount, but it will be just over $1.8 million. The Chromebooks will be completely covered, excluding the Google licensing fee, which is $38 per device. But other than that, it covers the Chromebooks that we will be purchasing, including taxes. For the hotspots themselves, it covers a monthly fee of up to $25, which that covers our costs. And then it doesn't cover the content filtering though, which is $10 a month. So those costs that are not covered will come out of probably ESSER funds more than likely. So that's how we're going to cover those pieces. So right now, Mary Lassica is working. Mary Lassica is our IT administrator, and her department oversees support for the schools and the devices that are out there. She's putting together a plan because we're going to need to coordinate very closely with the principals and the staff at the schools who are going to be supporting the process to identify who are the students that truly do not have a device at home. And we're not limited, I believe, to one device. So if a family has 2 students that don't have devices, I believe that they would qualify for those 2. And then for hotspots, if a family truly does not have internet, then we can provide 1 hotspot per family. And those are the constraints that we're going to work in. So part of what we have to do is be extremely careful, of course, to fall within the guidelines of the program, because if it turns out that we get audited and somehow they were able to show that we were providing devices or hotspots to families that truly did not need them, we would then, of course, be required to return funding to the federal government, which you never want to do because no one is ever happy about doing that. And when I mentioned that we wouldn't necessarily fully realize all of the funding, the reason I said that was because right now we have, I believe, just over 200 hotspots that are active, and those are being provided to the virtual academy students and families who don't have internet at the moment. So the funding was based upon if we had 1,120 hotspots going back to July 1st. Well, obviously we don't. So we currently own 800 hotspots, 200 of which have service on them, and we're going to purchase an additional 320. Those additional 320 are fully covered, the cost of the devices. They're only about $50 a piece, and the funding is up to $250 per device, so it's pretty substantial. But when I say we have to be very strategic about this, we want to turn up hotspots as we identify the students and the families who need them, so that we're not paying the $10 per month needlessly, right? So what I would guess is we're going to have probably a couple phases where we identify like, okay, we know we've got, 75 families for sure. We'll, talk with AT&T and we're going to say, okay, turn up service on these 75 devices. Then we'll do another increment of, 150 or whatever it might be. And each time we turn on service, we may end up doing maybe a little bit more than we need, because certainly we'll find out more as we go. And the Chromebooks as well, those are going to have to be managed directly through the IT department, which is going to be a significant lift for us. Historically, the schools have managed the checkout of devices to students, but because of the auditing, we believe that the IT department really has to be the one to implement a separate service where we would actually manage the inventory and we would have the names of the people recorded rather than having the schools do that. Because if USAC comes to us and says, show us the inventory, it's going to be a lot easier for us to show that rather than reaching out to all the different schools that have devices checked out. So that's the big picture. And it's really good news. I wish I could say we were going to be able to implement it tomorrow, but we are going to move as fast as we can, as strategically as we can. And I'll open it up for questions on that.
So I had a question, Lucas, and you answered part of it. So the district will be handling the distribution. How is the criteria going to be set so that the students with the most or greatest need will be serviced first versus a first come, whoever runs down to the district office first methodology?
Yeah, so we don't have the entire procedure developed yet, but that's what Mary Lassica has been working on. And we're going to talk with the principals. Well, we're talking with Zach Larson and Robin Sert, who are the director of elementary ed and secondary ed. And then after talking with them, we're going to coordinate with the principals to really identify the language that we're going to use, because we do have to be very strategic, like you said, Tom, about identifying the families who truly need it versus just someone who says, well, I do need it, but maybe they don't really need it. It's a tricky thing, because if a family says we don't have internet, we're not necessarily going to question that, but we also do have some understanding that there are certain families that we know really, really have a need. Our homeless families, for example, those families unquestionably they're going to be very high priority. And we also know that we have certain families where they might be free and reduced or free lunch. We also have to be careful about using that criteria because that is not one of the criteria that we are specifically allowed to do. But we know by its nature, some of those families are going to be our highest need families. And the schools really know their kids best. So that's where we're going to have to come up with, we want to be as nuanced as we can, but we have to fall within the requirements of the rules, which is if a family needs a device, we will get them one. Now, obviously, if it turns out we pass out all 6,000 and there was more that we needed, that's going to have to be a bridge that we're going to cross when we get there. We followed the criteria for the program, which was determining to the best of our ability how many students truly had no device. And part of the way we did that was a little bit more nuanced than some districts. We actually looked at previous usage of devices during the pandemic as part of our evaluation, because what we determined is some students received devices, but they never used them when they were at home. Well, if those students really never used them, that translates to they used their own personal device to do online school. So they truly didn't need it. So that was part of the nuance that we utilized, was not just how many devices did we pass out last year? We actually looked and said, how many truly got used? And so that's where we got that 6,000 number. We looked at actual usage data over a period of whatever, couple months.
Dawn?
Yeah, I have a question. Would this work like it would be checked out to the students, say like the computer and say a hotspot, and then does it get collected back at the end of the year? And then would it potentially be redistributed to them the following school year? And would they have that same priority, or does it get revisited? What does that look like? Because my other part of my question is, could there be scenarios where, like I'm thinking today, I was in a meeting with the elementary principals where there's this whole process around quarantine, kids who have to either self-prescribed quarantine or district quarantine, and they might be out for 2 weeks. And there could potentially be kids on that list who would have a need, but it would only be a temporary need. So I'm just kind of wondering if that would be part of it, or if it's just you're going to identify the biggest need, they get it till the end of the year and then they turn it back in, or are there some variables for situations, for example, that I just described?
Yeah, so for summer, I think we haven't crossed that bridge yet. If as a group we determine that there would be some value in that, the IT department would take its direction from instructional services. Historically, of course, we have not passed out devices, but during distance learning, when summer hit, we did collect, which makes a lot of sense. But this program is unique and falls outside of that. And maybe we're going to determine that it makes sense to have students have those devices during the summer, but then that of course adds an additional overhead on our part, because families move during the summer and equipment disappears. So I've worked for schools where we have one-to-one programs and where the devices were kept over the summer, and you always just have to expect then a certain amount of loss. It's just the nature of those types of programs. However, these are our highest need students. So for me, philosophically, when I think about equity, I think, equity literally to me means meeting the need of a student. And for these students that don't have devices, even if they're not taking summer school, if they don't have a device during the summer and those students do want to use a device for educational purposes, why not support them in that? But ultimately, that wouldn't necessarily be my decision to make, but I would advocate for that if we have the resources to be able to do it.
Ellie?
Can I
Oops,
just,
I'm sorry.
I'm just,
Go ahead,
just the part about could it potentially be used for students who are in a temporary situation where they just need it for 2 weeks or something like that as well?
Yeah, so it could only be given to them if they truly don't have a device. That's the only, so even if they, yeah, if they have a device at home that they could use, we can't give them one.
Ellie?
Lucas, just wanted to offer a thanks. I know that management was earlier meeting today and discussing how a number of districts across the Bay Area, Fremont Unified included, are going to be welcoming a number of Afghan refugees in the coming months. And we can only assume that families who are new to the area, new to the entire educational system here in the United States, are potentially going to be not with the resources they would need, or at least compared to other families who have long-standing residency in the area. So it's just fantastic that the district has this funding that's going to be made available to students, those who are current students and those who we're going to be welcoming soon.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lucas. I appreciate all your work there. That was, I know that went back and forth a few times, so it looks like that came to fruition, so that's great. Is that all you had to, I guess I just had a question because it does affect me. Is everything moving along on construction on the timeline, hopefully?
All right, well, I have a lot of construction projects I'm working on, Tom.
I'll leave it at that then.
I will say yes, we are working. There do continue to be shortages of supplies. I do know this is a little bit outside the IT wheelhouse, but even getting sheetrock and plywood right now is extremely difficult, and that is having an impact on the timelines for the construction projects. What I will share, one of the projects is the Rick Sklenkler Early Learning Center facility. Right now, the best information I have is that it should be some of the pieces should be substantially completed by the end of November. From the IT perspective, we have all of our pieces lined up and ready to roll. Even if it was ready tomorrow, we would have to schedule our contractor to get out there. But all the components for that are purchased. Even the TVs are purchased, which are down in the district office near the boardroom down there. So from the IT perspective, all of those components are ready. We're ready to roll as fast as we can. But right now we don't even have the racks in, and that's really just because the construction is not allowing us to do that. Those are currently in the warehouse, and as soon as the space is ready, we will ship the racks over there. And then as soon as the racks are in and the cabling is in, then we can do our more technical components. The middle school construction projects, I don't want to venture too much of a guess right now. The latest piece from the IT perspective is that we are compiling all of the numbers just to make sure that we are 100% accurate in the needs for the switches that we have. We have really quite a collection of switches and equipment sitting at the district office right now that will be installed as soon as we're able to. But we've been waiting to get from construction exact numbers for the numbers of clock bell speakers, and when specific data closets are going to be ready. And in fact, I just received those spreadsheets this week. So middle of this week, systems division and myself, we're going to sit down and we're going to review those. We're going to compare that really to what we have. And then big picture, and I suppose I can share this. So right now for the middle school conversions, what we've been doing is we've been putting in temporary switching. And part of the reason we did that was to make sure we could close out our voice over IP project. So all of those schools are currently running the Cisco phones, but they are not running our standard equipment. And so this coming fall, well, it'll probably be early winter here, we will be going out to bid for the actual Cisco equipment, Cisco wireless networking equipment, and all of the equipment that will bring us up to the standard for what we officially use in all of our facilities. So that's where we're at with that process. And then that would be at the earliest we could order that equipment then next summer, And that would allow us to qualify for our 40% discount off of that equipment because we'll be doing it through the E-rate process.
Thank you, Lucas. Sorry to put you under the gun there, but not as president of TAC currently, but as a teacher looking at it, I kind of look at stuff and I'm like, oh boy. Okay. Arun?
Yeah, thanks, Lucas, for following through on this. I have a general question. How do you become aware of these grants? Do they come to you through certain channels, or do you have to keep looking for them? And I had a general question on grants, and I was trying to do a little bit of work on grants at my elementary school. Didn't go very far, so it's of some interest to me. But we can cover it in a later meeting if needed.
Yeah, I can share just a real short paragraph on that, which is we work closely with the county offices of education, but of course we also have the chief technology officer groups that I'm part of. But for those who have been in education for a long time, we look for the programs that are kind of surefire, and the federal E-rate program is one of those where we're pretty much guaranteed programming or funding if we follow the programming requirements. So we look for, what are the bang for our buck? And the federal E-rate program is one of them. The emergency connectivity funding, because it's handled through the federal E-rate program, everyone was made well aware of that. But we work closely with the county offices of education. They tend to make us aware of opportunities, but we look for the ones that are going to bring us the biggest return.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. It's 8, well, I guess it's 8:13. I'm looking at 2 different clocks here. What I'd like to do is roll back now to look who would be interested in serving on the subcommittee that would be dealing with on how items get onto the agenda. I guess the easiest way is if people could just raise their hand and then get a snapshot of who would like to do that. It'll come up. So I have Robert, I have Arun, Juan.
Just a point of clarification, I would volunteer, but like you're a teacher also, so if I don't need to, I won't.
No, if you put your hand up first. Okay, so we have okay.
It's fine either way. I think this is very, very important. But I couldn't tell if you wanted to do it or not.
So the chair is ex officio
of any committee.
Yeah, if you can't do it, I'd be happy to be the fed person.
I have other duties that are taking lots of my time right now. It'd be great if you.
Oh, me too, Tracy.
No, I know.
I'm on like 4 district committees and this one and a bunch of my school stuff. But this is very important. It's like hugely important.
Okay.
So is the goal to get all the different groups represented? Because I'm not seeing
3
that.
parents. And the big problem for me is going to be scheduling, Allison, to be honest, more than anything in the evening, because I doing something. But let's do it this way. Let's see here. If I can't make it, Allison, would you be willing to step in that evening? There we go. Okay. So it would be great if somebody else from a different group would volunteer. If not, it looks like we have 4. Yes, Robert is a community member as well. So it would be a group of 4 people. And for the lack of a better way, I'm just going to take a picture right now so I have it. And what I will do is I will send out a doodle survey and to the 4 of us, and then we'll try to get together at a convenient time to meet from there. So, okay. We have that. So next is future agenda items. Already rolled the next one should about classroom and technology, and I think that, well, yeah. So that would be on the future agenda. Does anybody else have, now that you know Allison, you can just suggest items. Does anybody have any things to suggest for future agenda items? Arun? Oh,
Yes.
Arun?
Yes, I do. I had a few things. Uh, I would actually prefer to just write a pager on each of them, but I can just talk. Number one, can we do something about bring your own device? Um, I know we like to use Chromebooks, but then one is the lack of availability, and then we can definitely take a lot of pressure out of the Chromebooks if we actually let people in. So there might be some reasons why we don't allow them, mainly Wi-Fi access or special software. Perhaps there's ways we can get around that by having just a parent donate a Chromebook that they then get to take home or something, so that they can use it in school and then at home. I think a bunch of parents bought these Chromebooks just for their kids when they might not have that due to distance learning. That's one. Second one, I don't know if it falls squarely under technology, but do we have any security cameras? Uh, but I've seen a lot of vandalism, that kind of stuff happening. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up. Third, I have an interest in that grant thing, so I would like to see if we can build up a little bit of knowledge about what grants are there, public, government, private, whatever it is. I was trying to build up a program in primary school, but one thing I realized is that grants need to be written by teachers most of the time. Parent writing grants is not useful, but I'm just curious if you are leaving money on the table, because I did come across a lot of grants, but it just wasn't clear if you could apply for them. So I'll stop here right now. I have a bunch of them. I can't even recall properly right now. But I think it's might be best if we discuss it and I write a one pager and send it, or what's the best way? That's it.
Yeah, if you want to email it to me, Arun, we can take a look, see, and go from there and see where
Yeah.
they fit in. A grant necessarily wouldn't be a TAC issue, but
Technology grants. Sorry, I should say technology grants.
right.
Not grants.
But I've often felt, it's one of those things. Some districts actually have a grant writer and their response, and there are people that are professional grant writers, and I've also wondered with the size of our district but I don't do that into financial analysis. But if they could pay their salary, they'd surely be with it. Dawn, you're up.
Yeah, I think it's just worth mentioning, especially being we're about to turn some agendizing protocols over to a subcommittee. I think it's really important to always circle back to the role of the Technology Advisory Committee. There are lots of important things out there that are worthwhile discussing, but we always have to come back to the role of this group. So Arun, as an example, I think the first thing you brought up is a great example of something that could be discussed at TAC. I'm not sure that things like security cameras and writing grants is really something that we would have any, kind of say or role in. And I mean that respectfully, just trying to give you just some feedback. And as we go forward, trying to decide on things for agendas, I think it's very important that we always come back to what our role is. And again, even if it's technology grants, it still wouldn't be the role of this committee to write grants or learn how to write grants and things like that. But I'll just be quiet now.
Thank you. Lucas?
Yeah, I did want to address the mention of security cameras. Technically, right now, that falls under the purview of maintenance and operations. There, usually is discussion about that, vandalism or things like that happen. But we can, what I will say from the IT perspective is usually we're brought in as the support, because one of the things we always need to talk about is, well, what would an implementation look like? But I think and facilities is also, of course, heavily involved, because if you're going to do anything like that from the technical perspective, there are infrastructure pieces that have to be in place, strategic planning that has to be in place. And video surveillance is one of those things that if we're going to do it, there's got to be some buy-in on that. So, but doesn't fall directly under IT, which is not the case everywhere, but in FUSD that is the case.
Thank you, Lucas. Ellie?
Just an idea for agenda item, not necessarily for the next meeting, but as we move forward, eventually sites are going to have to decide what of their existing Chromebook stocks are completely at end of service life, and looking at little remnants of discretionary funding. So I think having some sort of statement from TAC or IT about what specific devices that might exist at each site will work with essential features that sites are using, like Clever or the secure browser for state testing that's coming at the end of the school year. Having clarity to our teachers and administrators later in the year would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Linda?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to piggyback on what Don was saying, and I think we need to be very, very clear on who we actually report to and who our decisions are made for. I mean, they're made for the district, but we are, as I said earlier, an advisory committee to the board. So we really have to be, respectful of what we are doing and who our audience is.
Robert?
So interestingly enough, when we first formed this committee, we were talking about funding sources, and it's actually in part of our bylaws. Item E talks about potential funding sources. It's never been a major part of the committee, but the district is chronically way underfunded in terms of technology. So it's not that we were designed to help an individual teacher write a grant, but we were always intending to think, well, we don't know how to do funding, but if no one else is going to put it in their thing, then we should at least be open to discussing district-wide funding or something to that effect.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you everybody for this evening. Any final thoughts from anybody before we adjourn? Nope. Okay, well, then without further ado, I will see everybody on December 6th. And I will make a commitment to Lucas as well, because there was, we will try to meet a little bit earlier, Lucas, to get the agenda out sooner to everybody. That's on me, because I put it on my calendar literally, and I call Lucas, and he gets right back to me, but I need to move it back a few days. That way we get it sooner. So, okay, everybody, have a great Thanksgiving.
Bye, everyone.